All right, hey everybody, Bob and Chris here. Bob,
What's
we're
going
doing a
on?
quick pick. How's you guys
Yep.
doing? So this is we've decided, by the way, public service warning. this one's this one's going to be a little spicy. In other words, you might hear words that we haven't used in the past. Not words you haven't heard, but ones we haven't used in the past. But
Or use enough. We may use once or twice, but we'll use them repeatedly. Some of you guys will have to go to church tomorrow, but that's
yeah,
another
well, I mean,
story
if
for
you were
this
my
weekend.
wife, it would be every day in all of them. But I mean, in our case, we've kind of reserved. So
That's right. So I did not give up cussing for Lent. I've done that before, but what's the point?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about what we got going on today, Chris. So talk about, give us
Yeah,
an
so we,
intro.
so we have another one of these that I think is a good topic. It's not one of those ones that just like hits MSPs, a lot of them in the audience in the gut, because it's not like a firewall vulnerability or something like this. We're kind of back on this kind of, supply chain code type attacks. And I think it's really, really relevant, regardless of what you do or what industry. If you're an MSP or internal security IT or
Yeah.
whatever, I think it's important.
Well, it's a tactic. It's a new tactic and a new technique, and it's universal. I mean, when we get into it, you'll find out it's universal. It's just, it's assholes, finding a new way to,
Back, and
fuck up
back
your
into
world. That's
GitHub.
what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. Back
Yeah,
to to your point. Yeah, talk about that. It's back to the GitHub.
that's it, man. I mean, everything's there in GitHub, man. GitHub is, yeah. I used to think that I used to say the RMM is the most powerful piece of software on the planet, but I'm starting to think that the GitHub repository is now the most
Well,
powerful thing. I mean, it's just, you get
yeah,
everything.
yeah. I will say this: the RMM may be the most powerful tool, but GitHub is the most powerful transmission mechanism
Yeah,
that you can count on, because it's like a public disease. It can pass public diseases around faster than anywhere else in the
yeah,
universe.
exactly right.
And again, this goes back to the quick pick we did about when GitHub got compromised back in November. Where those, because all these assholes are doing, right? I mean, they share access points and everything else. And when we go through the story, you're going to see there's so many common steps that were taken in this particular setup, for this particular exploit to get it ready to go and to make it happen. It all winds around the same set of steps that happened back in November when the first reported exposure happened, right? Where they got into GitHub, got into all of those repositories. Remember, it was like 57,000
That's
repositories,
right.
800 plus modules, npm modules that were affected by that. And now we're seeing, oh well, this is sneaking in inside of an npm module. Well, that's not new news to us and to Chris and I, for sure.
Well, and I also will say, like, we're talking about this set of assholes, but the global group of assholes they're gonna take this knowledge is gonna transfer over to them. So there's a lot of things we're gonna talk about today
Yeah,
that I
yeah,
believe those tactics are going to be used in other forms of attacks, like ransomware related attacks. So
yeah, yeah. We don't want to bury the lead, but you better stick to the end when we really hit the
yeah,
punchline,
that's
because there's a
exactly right.
punchline on this one that is fundamentally going to change how the standard operating procedure for these idiots, how they're going to go, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So
Yeah,
we'll get into it.
get into it.
So you're the developer guy, so you get to explain this
Well,
better
I
than me.
mean, what's interesting, when I was reading through this has to do with a threat called Glassworm, which we've got all the research. Like I said, we do this every time. We'll post all of the LLM analysis and from all of the different LLMs so that you could pull all those sources and take a look at it. But the thing that stood out about this particular one, this is a recent one. This actually happened here. It's been since last March, but really a lot of the heavy lifting has been starting to happen here in the last month. I mean, actually this month. And it was a mass compromise, 151. This is going to sound familiar if you've been following us. 151 GitHub repositories got force pushed with a payload, and it quote invisible payload. And we'll talk about that too. What
That's a
constitutes an
key
invisible
term.
payload? It is a key term. There's all kinds of code that uses the modules that these things were pushing to. I will leave that for you to look in the analysis to see it. It's a pretty big list. That was around the March 3rd through the 9th. And then on the 12th, this expanded to NPM packages, nothing new, right? Nothing new. NPM packages and basically Visual Studio Code examples in their marketplace. So again, another common thread, right? When they're doing this now, they're pushing this stuff to NPM modules, which are mass downloaded, and then to Visual Studio Code marketplace, which a lot of those are mass downloaded, or auto updating in a lot of cases, right? So on March 13th, a security firm called Aikido, in this case, they went public with this particular exploit. And then by March 17th, there was an aggregate confirmed count of 433 compromised components across the GitHub and NPM and Visual Studio and Open VSX ecosystem. So, 400, when we say 433 compromised components, you got to remember that nets thousands of people pulling this stuff down.
Yeah.
And it automatically getting updated in their
all over the
environments,
place, right? I mean, that's
all
the
over
thing about this stuff is, showing how to do Aikido. But anyway,
Yeah. So how did it happen? GitHub tokens. Once again, they got GitHub, they basically use this to pull GitHub tokens that are, infected in time. When you get your environment, your Visual Studio or any environment infected with something like this, then it can it's going to do what Trufflehog can do, which is it's going to go through there and look for tokens and keys and secrets and the whole 9 yards, right? So that was really the downstream play that started happening.
It's like letting the prostitute in your house and falling asleep. She's gonna go look through everything, and then probably leave an infection behind for you to deal with. That's exactly what this is.
It's a modern STD is what it is.
Should be called Glassworm. It should be called Glassworm, but that's for another day.
We're moving. We're moving.
Yeah. Spicy.
Yeah. We put a warning on it. Yeah. So a lot of high traffic React native, which React is a framework, right, for doing a lot of work in JavaScript things. So these are npm packages with 134,000 monthly downloads, kind of a thing. So you get it, right? So this is something that's pulled in by a bunch of people, and so now we can do a little bit of a.
And the other thing about when people pull this stuff in, there's not like it's not like when you download something, you're kind of caught saying, "Hey, I'm downloading something. I need to be concerned about it." I mean, when people download stuff from repositories, they just download it, man. They just trust it for whatever reason. That's just the way that's what it's been. Because, I mean, if you want to think about it, when GitHub started, it was kind of everybody was trusting everybody in a way, and it's evolved that way. But here, I mean, so people are just pulling stuff down. They could have automation that's pulling stuff down as well. So there's really not a lot, unless you've really taken the time to figure out a way to get in the middle of this. People are just doing it.
Yeah. Well, when GitHub was born, it was all manual. You had to push, you had to pull, you had to branch, you had to do it all by hand. But now that's gotten incorporated and automated in all these environments, right? So this stuff is automatic. So you don't really have to do anything extra for this to work. And most people, like to your point, they're going to put it on auto updates for the reason, we're talking about is it's work to go do. So a lot of this is because this is how it's always been done is the reason, unfortunately, that we're in this situation. Just means we got to change the way we do things. But anyway, so the two main technical tricks here that are going on, we'll talk about. So these are the keys. And one of them is this invisible. We talked about the term invisible. What the hell? How do you do things invisibly? You guys may remember, earlier last year that prompt injection was happening inside of the Windows environment where they had text that was the same color as the background. And then when Copilot or another LLM interpreted that document, they basically acted on the prompts that were, quote, invisible because they just had them the same color as the background and caused a prompt injection, flaw that had to be kind of tailgated. So this is not that. This is actually way back to an old school methodology of pulling this off. So they've basically been using the Unicode characters. So for those of you, characters encoded on a computer screen, those codes used to be ASCII codes, which were, finite size. Unicodes were developed because of all of the, nationalities and all the character sets for every country in the world. That's what Unicode does, is represent those things in the code. But they also have this feature called a public user area, which helps, authors that build things put stuff in there to help it be interpreted and rendered correctly, or it can be used for multiple purposes. And that's what these assholes are doing. They are using that large string and they're hiding literal code fragments inside of that. And when it's rendered on the screen, when a Unicode is, even with all that stuff in it, when it's rendered on the screen, you don't see any of that. You just see the character that the Unicode represents. You don't know that it's basically pack muling in code fragments as a part of those characters. So that's the invisible part about this. They're using code stuffing method inside of these damn Unicode characters. And again, just like last week when we talked, Chris, this is a living off the land thing. This is not a
Oh, yeah.
vulnerability. Nothing's going to change this because Unicodes are what they are.
It is exactly right. That's
it. So there's not going to be any fixing the Unicode system. It's just they've managed to figure out how to, use this methodology, which is going to require some countermeasures we can talk about later. By the way, none that you can just whip out of your back pocket and put into place either. It's going to take some work to figure out how to.
I was concerned about what you were going to say there because this is spicy today. But you did say back pocket, so that's good.
That's right. That's right. I just said whip it out, but it was I actually put the back pocket in there. That's what did it.
We've used lots of terms today: back pocket, pack mule. Lots of good old school terms.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as what a MITRE, code would look like on this is, it has to do with I never get this right. I want to say sternography, but it's steganography or whatever it is, right? Which is the use of steganography, which is the use of, rendering, use of invisible codes and rendering and that sort of thing.
You used to say the same thing when they would do like with those, remember the graphics, like
you could do it in graphics.
They would do that. That was kind of the old school way, and a lot of times it was used for more like information for spies to that type of stuff, and then it got used for malicious purposes as well. That's infections and stuff. So same concept, but but I mean it's again we call these guys idiots, but hey,
living off the land, being smart. Yeah. I mean, on a lot of
doesn't cost them anything to do this.
No. Yeah, I would say that the two big parts of this are really, really smart maneuvers because there's not really counters to them. And I'm going to let you talk about the next one because I think this is right up your alley. But they also talk about the blockchain. How they were doing that too.
Yeah, definitely. So what was really interesting about this is so when the payload gets decoded, it actually queries a Solana address. So that's a Solana wallet. So it actually queries this address. So it says, hey, look, instead of connecting to a C2 server or site or anything like that, it's actually leveraging a wallet. And then the attacker actually posts transaction memos containing the actual payload URL in that wallet. So basically think about that. It's just querying this block, which everybody knows here, blockchain is there. Doesn't go away, and that's the mechanism for it. It's repository for getting information back and forth. And not only that, is the attacker can leverage that and change that. So it's not a static type thing. You set it and forget it, and it's in the wallet forever. No, this particular portion of that wallet can be updated, and so that's exactly why this is. And I mean, it is. Can't get it taken down. There's no hosting provider say, hey, dude, you got some bad guys doing some stupid shit on your systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a good point in here is it's like no sensors are going to pick up on this. I mean, it's just URLs. And the crazy thing is it can be rotated, right? So just think about this. It's like it's a constant mechanism to do whatever they need to do. Just boop, 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 boop. Rotate, and update it as well. Here it says Step Security documented 50 C2 transactions between November 27th and March 13th. So the November of last year to March of this year. And then there was a backup mechanism for Google Calendar event metadata. Yeah. So I mean,
it's interesting.
Yeah. So now think about that is they even have a backup.
Yeah.
And again,
they have a disaster recovery plan. They're ready to go. Business interruption plan. Yeah.
That's right. Very resilient. So everybody should, learn some lessons off these guys. They probably do it better than you do it for your own business. So anyway, that's how this thing works. And what I was telling Bob before the call is I'd actually heard about, the blockchain and these wallets being used this way. And this is in this type of scenario, but I've heard like in ransomware type related events as well, this starts to be commonly used as well. Because again, they don't have to stand up infrastructure for this. They don't have to go take over somebody's system and turn it into a C2 server. They can just leverage this existing infrastructure that they know is immutable, kind of untouchable in a way, and they can do what they need to do with it. So,
well, IOCs usually contain destination URLs or other IP addresses or things where, that's part of an IOC in a lot of cases in the past. The point being here is they don't have to expose that, and it doesn't have to be consistent anymore. They could post a million transactions in that wallet, all with different URLs that they've already preceded out there, and let it randomly choose between one of the transactions that are in that wallet. They could say, hey, give me this one. I'll do a random seed on my side. Give me this transaction. And in the notes, it gives you the URLs or whatever you were going to connect to. So what this has done, the fundamental change that this is going to force is that knowing the URL of where everybody's connecting to, that's fucking done. That's over with. They're gonna get away from it. There's no reason for them to do it anymore. They can make it impossible for you to know where they're going to send it until they start sending it there. That's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this one is not to point any fingers, but if they do detect that you're in a Russian time zone,
yeah, the
process aborts. I wonder why they would do something like that.
They literally.
Why would they exclude? Why would they exclude people in Russia or that whole Eastern? I don't get that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it was I'm sure it was another country that wrote that exclusion in because they got neighbors in Russia.
Yeah, or maybe they like vodka a lot or something.
Yeah, or whatever. Russian but women. Yeah, but that was another little asshole part of this thing is so they've got a geofence on it so that if this thing lights off inside of the territory of Russia or on any Russian servers or whatever, it has the ability to go, I just want to abort. I stop. So yeah, I doubt that was a test case.
And that's and then I've heard in the past I've heard what they used to detect like Russian keyboard layouts as an example, and they would do in the ransomware world, and that's how they would kind of abort. So this is not new, but this is what it steals. And look, they don't just focus on one thing like GitHub tokens, npm creds, SSH keys, cloud provider creds, of course cryptocurrency wallet private keys. So there's over 49 wallet types targeted, what they're looking for, browser cookies and session tokens. So, they're looking for all the goods that can either make them money right away or give them access right away or whatever. And they also install some stuff. So they install hidden VNC servers, SOC 5 proxies. And they just turn what was probably a developer machine pulling that stuff down, just turn it into a botnet node, and they now use that as their staging to get to other machines within the corporate network. So,
yep, they're inside of the wire at that point. And again, you remember when we were talking about the compromised environments and how that works when you're doing things like cloning and or taking on a new project, how they'll run some auto configuration work. Again, here we are. This is actionable. This is somebody who's turned that information into an actionable process that's involved in it, right?
So, yeah. So this is, to continue the analogy. So there's been in there, taking all your stuff, rumbled through, and then like where your mom lives and everybody else lives, so they can go get there as well.
Rummage through there. Yeah.
Rummage through there. Exactly right. And she got your keys that you have to open their houses and stuff. So yeah, that's what happens, and it's exactly right. Talk about what happens when they do with those GitHub tokens.
Well, that's the point, right? So once they get a hold of those GitHub tokens, then they're going to crawl through repositories of the developers. They're going to do the same thing to that. They're going to set up all these forced pushes. They're going to populate your repository with the same types of code segments that make all this work. If you were to download them and, do a pip install, which anybody that runs Python knows how that works. You do an install to get a Python module built in there. And for some reason, you're doing a build and it clones and you wind up cloning one of these compromised Python repos like this. Then by doing that, it's going to, again, run those configs and do the configuration. And when it does that, then you're infected now. So not only your environment becomes another node to infect other environments, and they're going to sweep through your environment to the point Chris was making. Then they're going to grab everything they can because now they're inside of the wire. They're inside the wire at that point. That's really what's going on there. In order for them to hit this volume of people in this short a period of time, this goes back again to the worm LLMs and the other ones that we were talking about, where they're using these bad dudes, LLMs that have been built to help them automate a lot of processes on the attacker side. And so, because a lot of these things are happening in such volume in such short period of time, it's clear they're using automation tools, which in this case, the only thing it could be are a lot of these LLMs that we talked about before in a previous quick pick. So this is all related. So
Yeah, just like you got to scale your business, they got to scale theirs, and
yeah,
why not you leverage AI to do it
yep,
quicker
100%.
and
So
better? Yeah.
if you now there are some IOCs that you can watch, but again, it's going to be a little tricky because like Solana wallets are not just used for the bad guys to do bad stuff. It wasn't built for that. It was actually built for legitimate purposes. But if you go hit the research pages that we've got out there, it talks about what those IOCs are. Mostly they're hashes for different types of wallets, in Solana that Chris was talking about. There are some exfil IPs that you can watch for that were noted in a lot of the research. That'll be in there. So you can, at least you can put watches on exfil to those or block those IPs at a minimum, which will help you some. And then there's a force memo marker, because they use force memo, which is one of the routines that can be compromised. They use that so you can watch for force memo execution. That can be a giveaway. Another one of the, just the what we have related to IOCs at this point. Those are all part of that. So
Yeah, so be sure to check those out. I think I even think like, hey, look, if you're a developer,
right.
and maybe that's just the world you live in, you need to realize this is stuff that goes on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and so you start to need more aware, and you should be asking questions like, if you have security people or IT people, and they're necessarily not talking to you about these things or whatever, that's a little bit of a warning sign to say, hey, take the time, take the initiative, and ask questions and say, hey, what are we doing about this, if anything, or whatever the case would be. And this is where you really have to keep your eyes open. I know a lot of this stuff we're using terms like invisible, obfuscation, those kind of things, but there are ways, there's certainly ways for you to keep your eyes out, just to be kind of sensitive to this type of stuff.
So one of the things you need to be aware of, I mean, again, as a developer, we always use the idea of visual code inspection and review, right? So that's a big part of what, usually you do. That's just killed that, right? Because they're using these characters are not rendered. So you don't actually see by looking at the code, by physically observing the code, you don't see that. And most environments do not decode Unicode looking for instructions being stuffed in those public usable areas. So it's just when I said there's something that can be done, but it's not going to be quick. That's what I'm talking about. I can see that at some point someone's going to have to build a utility that it not only looks at the code visually, but also allows you to scan all of the invisible elements in there, because that's the only thing
Exactly
you
right.
can do. This use of blockchain as a C2 channel is really a nightmare. You can't take it down. That's the big problem. You can't. There's nobody you can call. You can't call 1-800-asshole and get it taken down. Just doesn't. It's just no chance.
No, man, it's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's like just using the ability just to use normal, ordinary things in the wild, right? I mean, it's the
Yeah.
same deal. And
Well,
yeah,
last week we were talking about Stryker using Intune to do a mass wipe. That's just how it all works. It wasn't like it was misusing things. They weren't using it for the right reasons, but they were using it how it works. Same
yeah.
thing here.
I heard those dudes didn't have insurance, man. Striker, believe it or not. Anyway, let's talk about. We'll get to our LLMs agreeing, disagreeing. So, all the five models confirmed the Unicode encoding technique that the Solana blockchain C2, 433 plus compromised components, around the credential theft and all that type of stuff. They all had a pretty much consensus on the miner mapping. And they all flagged the inability, just like Bob just said, to take down the C2 infrastructure. Hey, and yeah, conventional IR playbooks do not have an answer for this, or that's exactly right. The big differences, I guess, what we would call them would be Claude had the most IOC analysis just from how deep it went.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's the one that really provided the IOCs that we put on here. And then ChatGPT was the most conservative about what it said. It just it didn't like step up to the plate and say things from a certainty perspective. It kind of stayed a little
Yeah,
in the,
ChatGPT
well,
is a little bit, because of the focus on GPT, it stays a little bit more explicit. So it's going to only say it if somebody that it thinks is an authoritative source says, yes, this actually happened this way. It won't look at the prevailing discussion and consensus and then make a statement about that. So that's the
so
difference.
it kind of acts like a true forensics analyst does. And so Perplexity quantified the downstream blast radius, 50 to 500,000 transitive consumers. It also provided some financial impact estimates, which the other models didn't do. And it gave the best explanation of the triple redundancy C2 architecture that we talked about. Rock noted concurrent campaigns.
Yeah, so more than one campaign. More than one campaign was using this tactic. Yeah,
that was interesting that it picked that up, and it actually, it actually specified some stuff that the actual security company didn't. And it was very concise. Gemini named the zombie rat module and specific capability SOX proxy conversion, hidden VNC botnet node. It provided the best recursive infection narrative. So again, this goes back to, and the reason why we put this stuff out there, and Bob does a great job tracking this stuff down, is especially in this type of research what we're doing, you can tell the models, they all give out different information. So that in a lot of cases they're consistent with what they do, but there's some other things that might give you more information. One may be more in depth than the other, maybe one more candid than the other, whatever the case may be. So just take that into account when you're in how you use these models as well.
Yeah, 100%. Because I use them. By the way, I put them in what I call bastard mode. So I make them not make shit up. I make them say, no, you have to actually cross verify that these sources are real, amongst the models. So I let them check each other as a part of this round robin sort of a process. So that's the results you're getting out on these analysis documents from each engine. Then I do a summary, executive summary that validates them against each other and builds that. And then we use that to build out our show reference that we're talking through right now. But all of the information's in the document. And yeah, that's how you should use models, is to make sure that they're not feeding you. You have to be careful that they're not hallucinating, right? But if you let them check each other and you give them the right prompting, like don't fuck around and make up shit, make sure it's very specific and is verified. And I make it show all the sources so you can go look at them independently if you want to. I don't let it hide that.
And look at the documentation we put out there. It'll tell you how to kind of check for this stuff. It's no use for us to verbally
That's right.
kind of
we don't need to go back through that. Right.
Yeah, but there's 4 or 5 ways for you to go check for each of these things and look for the indicators and go from there.
Yep. There you go.
I hope you enjoed the spicy segment today.
I don't think it was as spicy as it could have been. So I think
that's right. We have to have levels of spice.
Yeah. You're right. So this is like Taco Bell mild. This would be the mild Taco Bell sauce.
This would be like a Northern California spice.
All right, fair enough. Midwest, yeah.
Or Scandinavian, maybe. Yeah. No, there's no spice in that, so that may not be a good analogy. So anyway.
All right.
Be good, everybody.
Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.